Welcome. I'm going to show you how to design and launch custom software without screwing up your life and making you want to potentially end it, okay? Tough joke, but what I see happen a lot is people will build something off of one platform and then eventually want to change that platform. And then that migration process is a whole headache and a half, guys. I want to be very clear. When you're moving something from one platform to another, it is like digging up your entire plumbing system. It's not like changing a faucet. It's not like remodeling a bathroom. It's not like doing all the interior furniture different. It is like digging up the concrete foundation and seeing the piping, the mud, potentially sewage, potentially rust, and doing the entire house over again. So if you start with better piping before you have this beautiful foundation on top of it, you will help yourself save yourself so much pain. And I want to help you save that pain today. Okay? So I'm going to walk you through my process, how I go from design to MVP to real full scale app and the bones of that. How to make sure you have the bones of that set up properly so you can scale and make sure that you have proper things going before you get yourself way too far in a rut and you're paying what I hear is like $800 a day, $1,200 a day to one of these companies that tries to lock you into their greedy palms. Okay? Not going to name names, but you probably know what I'm talking about. So in this process, we're going to go all the way from the ideation to the MVP validation to the full foundation to scale. To do the ideation portion, we can use something like Claude Design. Claude Design is very useful because a lot of people know how to talk to Claude already, or ChatGPT at the very least, and Claude Design is basically the same functioning, and it's doing not that bad of a job when it comes to that stuff. Obviously, there's some things you can do to stop yourself from looking like every other AI build out there, but we can have a good, strong foundation with Claude Design and then move on to the next steps. The next of those next steps is Bolt. I'd recommend specifically Bolt. I know you have Base 44, I know you have Lovable, you have Replit, but I specifically recommend Bolt for the ease to move off of Bolt, right? This is a very, very key thing. Some of these companies want to keep you there. They are doing a nice job of either A, not letting you know about that so that they can take more of your money, or B, just trying to be as helpful as possible and take care of everything so you never have to worry about what's going on underneath the hood. But then you're kind of left in their clutches. Okay? If you're going to build something for scale, you're probably going to want to eventually get to GitHub and an IDE. That is what the pros use, okay? You can do a lot of great things in these tools. I specifically pay for Bolt. I love Bolt. It is a great MVP validator, an MVP builder. Yes, technically, I can put in the database, the authentication, all that stuff, but you lose control, you get vendor locked in, you have things taken out of your hands. How would I describe this? This is how I would describe it, okay? If you stay with Bolt and Lovable, Replit, Base 44, any of these things for too long, it's like you're starting a car restoration project in someone else's garage. And if for whatever reason that garage makes changes, if they move tools around so it makes it harder for you to find it, like moving buttons around or features around, it makes it harder for you to find it. If they raise the price of electricity, like they raise the price of your monthly subscription, or if they just shut down one day, then you're screwed. You can't work on your car and you potentially can't get it out of that garage. Whereas if you understand the basics of GitHub and then how to use that with an IDE, GitHub going down would be the equivalent of like every book publisher in the nation going down or every writer going on strike. It would take a lot more for something like that to happen. Whereas Bolt is one individual person, one individual writer, one individual thing. Lastly, once we've gotten off of the MVP and design stage, we move into a real deal IDE. My choice is going to be Cursor. You can also use VS Code, and then some people use, some psychos use Claude Code straight in the terminal if you want to do it like that too. So I'm going to show you the methods that I use for my firm, Clean Cut Systems, where we do product design and engineering for real life businesses. And this is across different industries. I've done things for logistics, for recruiting and construction. I forget sometimes. Even sports betting, if you're a little bit of a degenerate. I actually cannot tell you I'm too far off from that. But you can also take a look at some stuff on my site if you want to take a look at more. But again, this is what I use in actual production. Okay, so very first step in all of this is going to be just getting something visually on paper. It is the UI, okay? It is basically the scaffolding of what you want to do, and it is the lowest cost thing to do. It is the lowest cost thing to make changes to. Making changes to database architecture or a button or a feature or something like that is so much more costly and complex than spending time changing the design, the wireframe, and the layout, okay? Now, if you wanted to be exactly perfect to the product design engineering process, you would start with a low fidelity wireframe, which is kind of more on the outline side of things. I usually skip that. At this point, AI is good enough to go straight into high fidelity, which is actually going to give you colors, fonts, images, and stuff like that. So that being said, we're going to just do something here. You know what? What we're going to do is we're actually going to do something that compares sources of caffeine. We're going to do energy drinks. We're going to do matcha. We're going to do coffee. Yeah, we'll keep it simple. Okay. So right now, what I'm going to do is you can either use the voice transcription in here or you can use Whisperflow. Either one works. Please go ahead and make me a one-pager website/quiz that is going to argue for coffee against other sources of caffeine. There should be a bold hero section, followed by a series of quick bullet points, followed by a comparison of coffee versus matcha, coffee versus energy drinks, and coffee versus nothing. Then there should be a small interactive quiz on what type of coffee, what flavor of coffee, or what basically craft, whether you want an Americano versus drip versus an espresso or something else nice and lovely. And then at the very end, it's going to offer you a map of the best coffee shops in your area. Okay, initial prompt is out. What I'm trying to do here is to give it sections, right? We can get a little bit more detailed in a second, but I want to give it sections. So as you can see, I start off with a hero section and then the bullet point comparison and then something else. And just to describe the layout, if you say something like, create me a website, create me a landing page, there is kind of a templated idea at this point that AI understands as like your typical landing page. But you do have greater control if you have the ability to describe the different sections and what you're looking for. Obviously, this comes with the caveat that you know how to design landing pages, and so you know the principles of like conversion, doing things above the fold versus below the fold, copywriting, headline management, typography, and hierarchy. So I am kind of assuming you know a little bit about what you're doing, but if you want, you can also just say, create me a high quality landing page. Why does it give me like such weird... Did you see the last tip? It was talking about eggs right now. It was so weird. Okay. Very nice, very nice. We have this here, and it is being quite cute, I would say. Quite, oh my goodness. Sorry, I got an alarm. It's a constant battle with these tools, these like MVP builders or UI builders, to spot the UI that gives it away that it is something vibe coded. And now I'm noticing that any like partial use of italics like this or like this is now becoming a giveaway for when something has been vibe coded. So what I would recommend is going through and changing those things, because remember, LLMs and these tools that build stuff based off of LLM knowledge are all going toward the aggregate. And something about the aggregate of writers and web designers is that it becomes the median. And the median, by nature, is not very good. It can be okay, it can be nice, but it's not going to be excellent. It's not going to be outstanding. It's not going to be standout. It's going to be none of those things. It's going to be familiar. It's going to be like nice. It's going to be like the nice guy, you know? You don't want to be the nice guy. You want to be like the whoa guy. You know what I'm saying? So, anyways, we're going to go through, we're going to change those up in a second here, but right now I just want to get an idea for what's going on. I like this type of stuff here. Overall, looking pretty cool. Perfect cup, nice little gradient. I don't like how sloppy that is though. And then we have a little quiz here. Dessert, basically no notes. Wow, that's very straightforward. I like that. This is weird spacing. I'm just getting very, very particular here. And then we got a nice little map. I like the stylized idea there and stuff like that. That's very, very cool. Back to my point from earlier. If I make a change here, it is just what we're looking at plus a little bit of HTML. This is the HTML behind the page. If you take a look at it, you can see how it's describing the nav bar. It's describing some hero sections, font stuff, things like that. And it is all the, let's see, if I go Control F, it is all the elements of what makes up this page. So you can see I have coffee here, I have coffee here, here, here. You can see there's a H1 title, there is describing different things and naming different things, and this is the actual text that you see on your website. And so this is HTML. Now, every step up in this process adds a level of complexity in your code. You go from HTML to something like JavaScript or React or a combination of those, or even further along than that, you have like variable management, you have intelligence, right? With the quiz, like something with the quiz, like we have down here below, this could actually be quite complex in the back end once you have like those later stages. So when you make changes now, you're making changes to one document with very minimal thing, and you're doing it on a very surface level. It's like changing your outfit. It's like upgrading from a t-shirt to a suit and becoming a better man. You don't actually have to go to therapy. You don't have to actually read books. You don't actually have to go to coaching. You don't actually have to put yourself out there, be uncomfortable and make changes and analyze yourself and do all that. And we don't have to do all that. We don't have to do all that. You just have to change your outfit, which for our purposes is where we want to stay for now. We can do all that deep diving stuff later. For right now, we would just want to stay in the closet and do the nice, clean changes first, okay? Remove the use of partial italics within headlines and sentences. In the main headline, particularly the word else, go back to the normal font. In the subheadline as well, instead use bolding. In the title, 7 good reasons, black or otherwise, remove that italic and remove the different color. Add a small hover effect in the 8-item grid that basically pops out that specific section with a little bit of drop shadow effect. Remove the gradient orb on the top right of the quiz. Remove the ellipses from the title of the quiz. Make the content in the quiz center aligned. All answers should be top to bottom, the title above it and the question above it. The next question button can be also centered. Okay, there we go. We got all the stuff, and a lot of this stuff is just me being kind of nitpicky. Like I said, we want to just get rid of that kind of stock UI look to it, that stock vibe coding look to it. Even though I respect vibe coders, I love you, you're my boys. There is something to be said about not spending enough time from what these LLMs, tools, and stuff produce, your own taste, and then production. You need to be putting in more of your own taste, okay? Overall, you need to be putting in more of your own taste, more of your own editing eye, and not just say, ChatGPT, make me $1 bajillion, make no mistakes. When I wake up, better be in my bank account. Don't do that, all right? Have a little bit of taste, have a little bit of direction, differentiate yourself a little bit, or else you're going to be obviously looked at as just another vibe coded app that didn't take the care to be something more. I'm always trying to find metaphors and I end up in some weird places mentally. But like one metaphor I could say here is like the difference between a human massage and like a massage machine. Yes, technically the massage machine is more efficient and you can, sit on a massage chair or have someone like put the little ball thing on you and it like goes up and down and like vibrates your body and your organs or whatever. But there's a difference between something like that that's automated, that is technically correct, versus a kind of like touch and feel of a masseuse that knows what they're looking for and spends time on the tension a little bit more. Okay. And that's how this should be treated. You want this to be something that is like hand massaged, almost literally. You want this to be massaged by your own taste into being something that is really showcases your taste, because you have a taste, you have an expression that you should be putting into this, and also just makes you a little bit differentiated from this like ultimate norm median type of feel. That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. I was thinking I was gonna have to go back and forth with this thing for a while to get this to work right, but that's awesome. And that's awesome there too. One small little thing here, actually, I want to do this. In the head-to-head section, make the individual traits like caffeine, flavor depth, cost per cup, and vibes, make those animate to their end point upon user scrolling to that specific chart. I hope that was clear to understand. What I'm looking for is when I scroll down, I want to see these bars go left to right, and we want to do it like item by item. Sometimes it'll do it by entire section. So if I scroll to this one, the ones below it will also animate, but then you don't get to see it. So I want to try to do it section by section, like microsection by microsection. So this one, if I scroll basically to 50% visibility, then you see the animation, and then this one 50% visibility, then you see the animation, and so on. Let's see if that worked. Let me refresh this B. Let me see what's going on. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yes. So once you have this to a point where you're pretty happy with it, and I'd say, you want to spend some decent time tweaking this. If you really have other things that you want to fix, go ahead and fix them here as much as you can. Use up all your credits here before moving into the next stage, because once again, you're fixing simple code at this point. You're fixing mostly visual code at this point. Little bits of functionality with HTML, but for the most part, it's like the display and all the styling and all that. And you want to get that right and not waste your more precious credits when you're doing things in something like Bolt or Lovable, Replit, etc. So now what we want to do is basically take this HTML by clicking it and downloading it. I already downloaded it and you have it here. What you're downloading is essentially this. It is all this text here. So like any other piece of text document, you can upload it into one of these builders. Once again, I prefer Bolt. Second place would be Lovable. And I like these two because they, I think, understand a little bit more that people are going to be using these things for like quick MVPs or quick projects into the more professional and serious versions of using GitHub and then something like Cursor. Trust me when I tell you, with vibe coding in general, one of the biggest issues is that you can just drill and drill and drill into one direction that is slightly off with slight mistakes that ends up really biting you in the butt later on, right? If you go deep and deep and deep, you're gonna have to walk your way back in from this like dense forest of mistakes just to get to a clear area to finally go the right direction. And we'd much prefer you to go a couple steps forward and then kind of reorient yourself, and a couple steps forward, reorient yourself, and then make sure you're going the right way, okay? So that being said, the best way to avoid that is to kind of follow this process. In our case, Claw Design to Bolt and then to Cursor. So right now, we're gonna take this, we're gonna pop it in here, and then we're just gonna give it a small description here. Recreate what is in the HTML file, make it a functional app in terms of the quiz. At the end of the quiz, ask for an email. And then when clicking on the map, show some more details of each individual coffee shop. Keep the basic same style, make no mistakes. I'm just kidding. Make no mistakes is kind of like a meme at this point. I just throw it in there because it's funny, but you don't need to do that. Okay, I was able to like file my taxes and do a bunch of different things while this took forever to do it, but whatever, it is done now. Okay, so for the most part, it is basically recreating the entire thing. It's got the animations, it's got that stuff, almost even better trigger than it was before. We have this question here. I just want to make sure that it asks for an email at the end and the email is at the end. That's cool. Okay, so we can see here in the chat that it set up Bolt Cloud. Bolt Cloud, if you don't know, and go here into the database, it is going to be its own version of a database, okay? This is something that you want to see. You want to see the ability to claim in Supabase or connect to an existing database, essentially some method for you to have your own data and move it to your control. Right now, it's fine to have the database within Bolt's database, but at a certain point, once you have live users and stuff like that, if you intend on making this scale past, I'd say past 10 users, even past 1 user, to be honest with you, I'd say the whole point of something like Bolt is to get it to the point where the functionality is there, but you don't want to have like a lot of logged information and stuff like that. Once you start getting to like active users and logged information past your beta users, I'd say personally, that's where you want to move into Supabase so you can really sturdy it up, really make the foundations nice and strong so that if you do want to scale this to a full-blown SaaS or something like that, you have complete control and you never get vendor lock-in and you have just full transparency into the code and what's going on underneath the hood. The goal of this stage, of the Bolt stage, is to get it to where it's functional and doing the main things that you want I'd say for 1 to 5 users, your beta test of users. And if you note the difference on the back end here, we're not just dealing with a basic HTML file. We're dealing with individual components. So this here specifically is the cup SVG. So this SVG is its own file. The quiz in and of itself is also its own file. If you scroll down within here, you can see the individual questions as well as the email input. We also have the map as its own file. So this is basically describing the details of what it's showing and individual ways of how it works. And this is much more complex than just a basic HTML. Then we have other, what I would call supporting files or dependencies, which are everything that you need to set up a code base and to get it running properly. This is kind of cool. Within Bolt, they have a prompt that says, for all designs I ask you to make, have them be beautiful, not cookie cutter. Make web pages that are fully featured and worthy of production. You can get into a whole debate onto how to use skills and how to use rules for stuff, but this is what I would consider like almost empty language. You have to talk to these machines like they're borderline autistic, right? You have to talk to these machines like they have no idea of any sort of like sayings. They don't understand what cookie cutter means. They might actually literally think you're talking about a cookie cutter, like the piece of metal that you use to cut cookies. They're like, okay, we're not talking about cookies, so no cookie cutter, right? Any sort of like metaphors and stuff like that. Try your best not to use these things. Use technical language, not technical in terms of like use this line of code and this line of code, but technical in terms of if you're designing visuals, talk about fonts, talk about placement, talk about margin, talk about rounded edges, talk about, line divider, talk about the specific animation or the specific effect that you're looking for, right? Talk more in terms of like video editor language. That's really going to help you get what you want out of it visually. And then on the functionality side, you might need a little bit more vocabulary to understand some things like variables and decision trees and matrices and stuff like that. But that's like the next layer. You'd basically want to tell it how to code those things in the terms of logic. Okay, so now what I want to do is add a little bit more functionality. So this is what we would spend the time doing within Bolt. I realize that this is not like the most like function heavy or feature heavy build. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make this quiz have a little bit more logic to show you, again, the main idea of building within something like this. Okay, so it built out some basic logic. It's talking about Q1 and they have intensity, milk, and sweet as a couple of the parameters. You got time, you have milk situation again, and you have a flavor that you chase and what's the cup for. And then here you have like the decision tree and decision logic. So again, this is what I would really hammer out in this stage. It's any sort of logic. Now, obviously we're doing something very simple and like kind of almost cute in a way, but you can be building like serious business tools. So you can be describing like how you're managing a lead or how you're doing follow-up sequences or how you're managing marketing collateral, how you're managing anything that gets produced or tracked or notifications or, how one row affects another row of data and stuff like that. So this is what I would spend my time on at this point. The goal is to get one user to use it on Bolt to see the functionality the way that you'd like it to see. And I don't mean just like one user that's your only tester, but to have one successful user. You can have a handful of users or up to 10 beta users, but one of them has to get their goal accomplished all the way through. And you have to kind of find the holes in any sort of logic, any sort of decision tree, any sort of feature and navigation, things like that are what you really want to manage in here. At this stage as well, you can also start to implement LLMs or other third-party tools and start to test them and how you get the outputs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this quiz a little bit to have like a bit more logic and then also implement an LLM to show you that step. What I want to add right before the email question is a field for the user to type in their name. And then what we're going to do is write a personalized paragraph that takes their name and walks them through the reasoning of why they should have the drink that you suggested. Okay, testing the quiz, putting in my name, and then there you go. Frank, the cappuccino is the right call. You want milk, but you also want coffee to show up and make traditional holds better. Cool. So what it's doing right now is it basically is putting in my name as a variable into the rest of this text. So to show you, I'm going to go here and we're going to go into the quiz. Okay, so you can ask it to help you identify the code if you can't find it, like I was having trouble there. But you can see that it is basically preloading all this text. But if you want to make LLM calls on the fly, like with your users, you obviously can't do this. This is more deterministic, which in some cases makes more sense. In other cases, you want something that's more variable. So let's assume we don't need this. Let's assume we can't have something hard-coded. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an API key from Claude. So if you don't know how to do that, you go to Claude console. Click on the first one. If you don't have an account, just sign up for this account. Scroll down on the left-hand side and go to API keys. And then here you can create an API key. So now that I have the API key, we're going to go into the settings. Then we can go into secrets. And then in secrets, we're going to have Anthropic API key, I believe is like the standard. Then we're going to paste that key in there and create a secret. Once you have that, now you have the ability to use the LLM tool through API call to do a lot of crazy things. And we're going to make that change now by implementing that key we just got from Anthropic. Got it. I don't want to have hard-coded answers. I want to make a live LLM call. I have the key in the secrets. Let's set up a server function if needed. Okay, so changes were made, and now what's going on is it's making a live call to an LLM through what's called a server function or an edge function. So this is basically what's going to be seen by the browser and not your API key. This is very important to do it this way so you don't have your API key exposed to the internet and the wild world of scammers or anything like that get a hold of it and start to screw with you. Once again, this is the point of this step. It is to get these things, like the functional things, like the secrets, the server functions, maybe even a little bit of authentication, database management and stuff like that, all functional to the point where you have one to a handful of people able to accomplish the main task of the site or the app. And then we can move into the next step, which is going to be Cursor. Once we've gotten to that stage, with Bolt, they make it pretty simple. What you want to do is basically go up here and connect it to GitHub if you haven't. I already have my account here. If you want to check it out, that's my account. I'm just going to name this copy. I'm going to create repository. And as simple as that, it'll create the GitHub and then basically have everything in GitHub. To show you, it is right here. Literally 2 clicks once you have your account set up. It is all the same stuff you have within Bolt in terms of code and all that. And you have it here in GitHub. And it's very, very simple. Some tools, specifically Replit, will make this difficult for you or other parts of this transition difficult for you. And so now, once you have it in GitHub, which is like the very source of everything, you can go over into Cursor, hit clone repo, open from GitHub, and then in here, I have the very first one is coffee. And then I'm just going to select where I want it. I have a folder named Cursor Builds. I'm going to select this as a repository destination. And now I have all the same code here in GitHub. But I have the power of the ability for this full IDE with all these different models like Composer, GPT-5, Codex, Sonnet, etc. with all these different modes like agent, plan, debug, multitask, and ask, with the ability to really dig into my individual components. Like if I want to look at the quiz logic, I can see this and I can have multiple agents and I can do all this stuff. Once you're moving into the professional level of having multiple users and things like that, you can really take your vision to the next level. From this point, quick thing what you want to do is check the local. So you can go ahead and literally type in here, run local. It'll identify if you need what are called dependencies. Any dependencies are things that you just need on your computer, whether that's Git, Node, or something else. It'll install those if you give it permission like it's doing now, or if it needs to basically navigate you to a website, you can go and do that and it'll walk you through it. So I went ahead and did what it needed to do. Now it's giving me a link here. I'm going to go ahead and control click it. If you're on Windows, if you're on Mac, it'll be command or whatever crazy thing that you do. We're having a quick issue here. This is the next most important thing. It is your Supabase URL. So again, makes it nice and simple. You go to database, advanced, click on claim and Supabase. If you have a Supabase account, it'll basically pull up your organizations and then you can either create a new one or add it to one of yours. You click on this, it might have you upgrade an account if you need that. But for free builds, you should get 2 free ones. And then as you can see, it is basically connecting Bolt with Supabase and transferring it over. So now when I hop into Supabase, we can see here that I have this Bolt database. And what I need is this URL. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to take this over to this section here. I'm going to set up what's called an env file, .env. This env file is any sort of linking towards databases, APIs, or things like that. One other thing that you'll need is going to be the Supabase anon key. You can go over here to API keys and click on that. And then you can find the publishable key, which is the exact same as your anon key. One small thing to clarify, you're going to have to use Vite in this case for setting up the local. It's just a way for allowing it to read your local files. It'll tell you everything you need to know here. If you're having trouble, just have a conversation with it about dependencies. This is the stuff that is like configuration and setup. So it's not like a lot of vibe coding. It is something that you should learn little by little as you go. But as long as you get your local project up and running so you can start to make changes and push those changes, you'll be good to go. All right, so now we have the local host here, and just to show you the same basically workflow, what I'm gonna do is make a small change, like this headline for instance, and then we're gonna push it to the GitHub. So in this case, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open a new chat. I'm gonna say, with this transcription, please change the headline entirely and make it a different color. It's going to go ahead and do that. And as you can see, it's kind of similar where it's going through and talking you through, it's thinking which files it's choosing, and then it's going to show you the diff. The diff is basically the difference between the old code and the new code. And once you see all that, it's going to give you a nice answer and a summary. And then you can even double click on these things if you'd like to see the specific things there and those changes. So now that that's there, we're gonna go back and you have this completely, I'm gonna call it hideous change, but for sake of demonstration, we're just gonna do that. If you go over into this third little icon here, this is where you're gonna see all your changes, and then you're gonna see your specific commits. Commits are basically like checkpoints. If you're playing a video game, you reach a checkpoint and then you have like a save, right? So what you wanna do is after a couple of changes, you commit those as a save point. And then you're always going to give it a small message to let yourself know or other developers know what specifically was changed. So here I'm going to type in headline, then I'm going to put commit, then I'm going to put sync, and then you can see down here, it's going to basically add that commit, and then it's going to confirm that. You're going to see nothing else moving. And then if we go back into GitHub, if we refresh this, we're going to see that the setup files were set up 10 minutes ago, and the specific things that we changed are going to say now. And then as you can see, if we go in here into the commits, then we're going to get a full history of those changes. So I just want to make that video going over all the details of how to move from one part of the process to the next and when to do so. This is to help you, stop you from making the mistakes that I see a lot, which is overbuilding in one thing and then not understanding the technical setup, so that you end up in a situation where you're so deep into the forest that getting yourself out of there is such a big headache. And it's not the fun part of vibe coding. It's not the fun part of creating features, of doing things for users, of optimizing conversion and doing all that stuff. I want you to spend the majority of your time there and the least time on configuration and setup. But you do need to know a little bit so that if you get yourself down into trouble, you can recognize that, pull yourself back, use AI to help yourself identify the solution, and then get yourself moving again. If you have any questions, drop comments, let me know what you'd like to see next, and I can go into further detail. I was doing this in a quick and dirty way just to get something up and off the ground, but there is some stuff that you're going to run into that probably is not mentioned in this video. Odds are I ran into it as I've built projects for multi-million-dollar companies, 100 people plus companies with different functionality and whatnot. So let me know if you have something and I can maybe make a specific video to address that. If you'd like to learn more, check out my school in the About page or check out any other videos.